Merry Christmas, you filthy animal. And a Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah. We are the Armed Attorneys, and today we are coming to you on Christmas Day and the first night of Hanukkah. Oh,
Does that happen often?
it does not happen very often because Hanukkah's on the lunar calendar, so you
Sure.
never know. Could be in November, could be in January, could be anywhere in between. But we are coming to you today on Christmas Day, Hanukkah Eve, with your questions answered. Stick around. We're going to be talking about your questions about the Chevron Doctrine, who can tell you you're not allowed to carry, and how do you get off jury duty. But before we get started, show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And I really enjoy these segments
Yeah, I do too.
because, we read so many of your comments. We try to reply to a lot of y'all, but I think it's most fun when we get to talk about them out loud because sometimes I don't learn the answer until I hear from you.
Sure enough.
But I think we'll start with, and I'll throw this to you. We have Lloyd Wallace, 9326. He says, I want to know why Chevron was struck down for the rule making, but then why aren't all the rules made using Chevron immediately voided? It's a really good question.
That is a really good question. So it is not as though the rule was made under the permission of Chevron, and so everything is null and void. The rule was made. An agency interpreted said rule. Someone challenged it, and the court said, we defer to the agency's interpretation. So I will say, number one, courts have not relied on Chevron in quite some time. So this is not going to come up very frequently, but the way that we would fix it would be another lawsuit.
Yeah, and I'll say there's some rumblings about the Trump administration basically through executive order opening up the door to phase out some of these policies that were justified under Chevron so that should they ever come back, I mean, that gives
Just slash the CFR.
that gives a very good and clean issue for standing when the issue comes back up, attempts to be reinforced. All right, now we have this doctrine to evaluate the case under. So what Chevron did was, hey, gives all the deference to agencies in interpreting their own rules. Well, guess what? Who's well equipped to interpret the law? Courts.
Courts.
Right? And that's where the authority now lies with. It's back with the courts. And so in the case that was striking down Chevron, Loper Bright, if you want to check that out, they were really asking the question, what standard do we evaluate this case under? And the trial court and the appeals court applied Chevron, and at the Supreme Court level, they said, shouldn't apply that standard, and Chevron is dead. And so they answer the question for that case.
Right, for that case. But let's say there is an administrative rule that was challenged and a court ruled that by using Chevron, they were going to defer to the interpretation that the regulatory body was asking for. Well, what would have to happen now is someone would bring a new lawsuit regarding that same rule, someone was standing, someone who's been affected by it, and the court would look back and say, okay, now Chevron has been overruled. We're no longer deferring to the agency interpretation. And then the court would decide, maybe the court would agree with the agency.
Yeah.
You don't know, but the court would decide what the proper interpretation of that rule is. So it doesn't mean everything's automatically dead. Doesn't mean that current rules or decisions on those rules would in fact be reversed, but it is piecemeal process. But again, luckily, courts really weren't using Chevron very much in these last decade and a half. So there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have at John Loy 9331. Some time ago, I remember you said certain types were poor choices for jury members. One of those was an engineer. And as a retired engineer, I'm curious as to who you think and who else makes a bad choice for a jury member.
I love this question. So,
Me too.
jury selection, a little bit of a misnomer. It's jury deselection. You bring in a bunch of random people. Each party tries to figure out if any of these folks have biases that would make them not a good juror for this case. For example, drive them while intoxicated. Well, if you had a family member that had been killed by a drunk driver, guess what? You might be really great in a self-defense case, an arson case, but maybe this isn't the right case for you. So for the most part, they're trying to sort out biases, and they're trying to see who's going to follow the law. And this is important, especially with self-defense. You don't want somebody who hates guns, would never own a gun, doesn't think anybody should have a gun, be on a jury in a self-defense case. And so there are some kind of broad brushstrokes, I will say, attorneys paint with when they're looking at who is the right juror for this kind of case. And there's a handful of people that I don't necessarily know, depending on what kind of case I have. I usually go into jury selection with I create like an avatar in my mind of this is the perfect kind of juror for this case. And there's a few situations where I can imagine, hey, guess what? Engineer is the guy I want. But I'll tell you, the state usually hates engineers.
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on what your defense is. Because I'll tell you, there are many cases where I do not want engineers because engineers are highly technical. And if like the nitty gritty facts don't necessarily favor me or my defense, I don't want you. I want someone who's emotion based. I want someone who is, who I'm speaking to in that moment. However, I have cases where the facts are dirty. The facts suck, but the law is on my side. And in those cases, I love engineers. I want engineers because I want you to put the emotion aside for the dirty facts. And I want you to look and say, he didn't break the law. And that's what's important. Now, I will say, so we've got engineers as a class that I either really want or really don't want. Teachers as a class that I either really want or really don't want.
Yep. Nurses a lot of times.
Nurses, although a nurse really saved us, Leslie. And I remember we had that felony strangulation trial. A nurse saved our bacon on that one.
Yep.
So that was good. But it's not always the most important thing, remember, because you have everything that's getting people struck. Everything from, something you said, something you didn't say. Not if you remained quiet the whole time, you're definitely on the jury. But, if I asked who thinks blah, 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 and you're one of the people who's like, I don't think that might be important to me. There's things like,
are you super agreeable?
Are you super agreeable? Did you give me a dirty look? Maybe there are times where I want parents or don't want parents. There are times where I want someone with, a very manual job.
Yeah.
There's times where I want someone, that last murder Leslie and I had, we really wanted academics, right? So it depends. That last murder Leslie and I tried, I struck a woman because she was wearing knee-high boots in July in Houston. And I thought, if you can't...
You're so unreasonable.
If you are that unreasonable and that dumb, I do not want you on this jury. So you end up with people who you're like, I'm not crazy about that profession, but here they are on my jury because there were bigger fish to fry. Right?
And just another little inside baseball on how the sausage is made. I'll say, like, when jurors walk in, and this is maybe silly, I've done it my entire practice. When jurors are walking in, we have our juror squares that show where everyone is sitting. Typically, we'll have their name written down. I take a snapshot impression of the person, and I draw smiley face, neutral face, sad face.
I do that too.
Yeah, and if you haven't spoken the entire time and all I'm left with is faces, like smiley faces, sad faces, that's the only data point I have, and that's the kind of stuff that I'll use if I have nothing else to go on.
I know. And believe it or not, there are times where we have nothing to go on. Like we've got your demographics and we've got a smiley face because you didn't say anything. And boy, that is sure how you get on a jury.
All right, next we have Rusty Shackelford, 4445. We've answered a Rusty. I wonder if this is the same Rusty.
I don't know if this is the same one.
All right, he said, all right, small town post office in a strip mall. Is the entire strip mall parking lot prohibited location? That's a really good question.
It's a great question. We actually do have case law on this, and the answer is no. Even though your standalone post office is prohibited in the post office, the parking lot, and believe it or not, the sidewalk out front, strip malls, not so much.
No. So what the law looks at is, all right, yes, there's federal employees present in a leased location and where they're performing work. That's going to be off limits. So that, that section of the strip mall where they are, that's going to be off limits for purposes of the post office carry law. But everywhere else, it's going to be fine. Yep. But it's not a silly question.
No, it's not.
They had to litigate this, and it had to get a pretty serious appeal in order to flesh the stuff out. So, all right, next one. I'm going to ask this one to you. Question: holiday bazaars and public schools, do gun-free zone laws still apply in those situations where the building is being rented by a private third party?
Yes. So, unfortunately, well, and I will say this is in Texas specifically.
I bet it's this way everywhere, though.
It's probably this way everywhere. But when a public school is rented, it does not matter. A public school ISD property is a school 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Christmas Day, all summer, on Sunday when the, whatever is renting it out, every time. So you've got your gun-free school zone regardless. You've got your state laws affecting schools regardless. A school is a school is a school is a school.
Yeah, and I think if you want to be certain for your state, I mean, look and see how your state handles this. Most of the time, we just have a list of prohibited places, and it'll say a school. If it says a school while school's in session, all right, well,
Great.
Okay, great. There you go.
But the gun-free school zone, which he asked about specifically too,
Yep.
that's always going to be in effect
Yeah,
because
so-
it's not an exception.
Right. So the federal gun-free school zones law in your state may have a state-level gun-free school zone law. They're trying to propose that in Texas this session. Annoying. But, that says 1,000 feet from the grounds of a school. There's lots of exceptions to it, the most common being a license or permit holder from the state in which the zone is located. So again, there's a lot of different moving parts here, but I would say generally it's a school all the time unless your law says otherwise.
Yep. All right, we have at Uclanic 4142. What if my workplace is controlled by the federal government? So this was in response to a video we made about employers.
Yeah, we had a couple of questions about this.
Yeah, prohibiting. Yeah, we pulled a bunch of those because y'all had really good questions about it. So your employer prohibiting your carry. So what if you work with the federal government, Richard?
Well, federal government generally prohibits firearms inside of federal facilities. So we have that prohibition there. But then we look at, hey, all right, can they make a condition of my employment that I not carry? And the answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, you are going to be in hot water for carrying unless is within the scope and course of your employment and you have that explicit authority. But I mean, here's the thing about federal facilities too, is you're not gonna be able to carry in the parking lot either.
Yeah,
so you're a dead duck.
I hate that. But yeah, I mean, obviously we're less safe, but the way we look at how federal law defines property, some states will say premises, they mean building, portion of a building. When we talk about federal land, federal facilities, they're talking about property lines. So it's usually a little bit more all-encompassing than just a building. So be very, very careful. Unless you fall into one of these exceptions, think military, think law enforcement, you're probably not going to be okay to carry.
Well, and you're going to get fired and you're going to get prosecuted.
Yeah.
So, because that's the difference between the regular employer and the federal employer. Regular employer generally can't make it a crime. Federal employer, you got a double whammy.
Yeah, and I think that leads perfectly into the next question. All right. This is from Ricardo Cintron. Cintron, okay. It's from Ricardo Cintron 1046. How can anyone prohibit a right?
Oh boy.
That's a good question.
It's a very good question because I think people get confused about this issue. So we had the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights, amazing. However, Bill of Rights protects us from the government.
Yeah, it restrains the government.
Does not restrain private individuals. So I can't, and of course there are still restraints. Like if Richard says something I don't like and I punch him in the face for it, well, I'm going to get prosecuted for assault.
Right.
But I didn't violate his First Amendment rights.
No.
If Richard, this Richard isn't my employee, but let's say one of my employees starts popping off on the Facebook or, even in the office, they start saying things that I don't like, I can fire them for that. I can fire them for exercising their First Amendment.
Why do you love censorship and why do you hate the First Amendment?
This is hypothetical. Wouldn't, but I can fire them for exercising their First Amendment rights because I'm not the government. I'm just a private employer. And the same goes for the Second Amendment, unfortunately. Now, where does that stop? Well, I can't fire you for your religion.
Right.
Right? I mean,
protected classes.
Right. So, I mean, the government will step in, but that's very specific, right? I mean,
Right.
you can fire someone for their opinions. You can fire them because they like guns all day long. You can't fire them for their religion, their race, their gender, their sexual orientation. Is that on the federal level?
Yep.
Okay. For their national origin.
Marital status.
Right.
So there's a lot of things there. And then the way that I think about it, we have this conflict of individual rights. When you have a conflict of rights, let's say I'm in my house. Can I exclude people from coming into my house? Absolutely. Do I have to necessarily have a reason to exclude them? No. But if I wanted to make up a silly rule saying, hey, you can't carry into my house, I mean, I can say that. I'm not going to say that. But you see how, all right, well, you have a conflict of rights here. This person has a right to their property, their house, their business. We see these restraints on the federal government. Do other people's rights, do they have a higher claim of right in the location where they are? Sometimes no, and that, one person is going to rule there. So That's just the way that it works out.
Right. Okay, at Michael Sweet NN5BG, serious question. What if your religion requires you to be armed? I love this question. I was really excited when I saw this. It is a requirement of Sikhism, the sixth largest religion on the planet, to be armed. This has traditionally meant carrying a sword or knife, but guns are also permitted. So there is a fascinating body of law surrounding this, and I actually had to do some research to figure it out. But
Yeah, we'll throw that up. And
Yeah.
we'll link it, yeah.
yeah. But it is, so there are lots of different things. So I'll tell you, employers can prohibit a Sikh employee from carrying their weapon, but only if it is a safety issue to other employees or the public. Schools can prohibit Sikh students or parents, but only, not as a religious requirement, only as a very standard no weapons in school. And they should make an accommodation, like sewn into this sheath so it can't be, retrieved, blade dulled, things like that.
Yeah, and you see, all right, this sounds like discrimination on its face, but if the rule is applied to everyone
equally.
that's where the federal government finds the workaround. The material Emily found that was kind of fascinating was like TSA. What happens with this? They have to check it, or it has to be so small and insignificant that it basically is not a threat. It's kind of what it I was led to believe this said. So you see how that comes up. But if they apply a law equally, even if it's unjust, then it's not discrimination.
Right. So, interesting, very fascinating intersection between religion and weapons. Thank you for this question.
Yeah. All right. Next one we had. All right. Well, we got two more. These are very funny. This one just says, this is from Rareform6747. Please, WTF, same clothing.
Yeah. Okay. So here's the deal. We are lawyers. I don't have a boss, right? So when I have court, I come into the office looking highly professional. And when I don't, like, I was wearing a sweatsuit when I walked in today. Like,
It's the holiday season.
it's whatever too. Who's going to fire me for it? If I'm, going to work out afterwards. I mean,
It's a tracksuit Friday.
It's a tracksuit Friday. I mean, it just, so number one, this keeps us from being just like wildly different humans from filming to filming, which is good. So also we batch film.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want you to know if I only filmed one video or if I filmed 5.
Should we let us know in the comments if you need us in tracksuits?
Fair. But anyway, yes, that is. And like, we wash these, like, occasionally.
Emily doesn't wash hers.
Well, I only wear it for like an hour a week, so it just takes a while. But it just is what it is. God, people get so mad about it though.
Yeah, there you go. All right, this one is for you. This is from Drundle. I swear I saw Emily today at the Friendswood HEB. Was that her?
Oh, okay. So, if anyone ever thinks they see me at an HEB, yeah, it was me.
Just come up and say hello.
Well, yeah, also come up and say hello. But yes, I love HEB, and that was probably me. I love HEB. If you see me at an HEB in the greater Houston area, I am in my happy place. Yes, come say hi.
It's always
Let's
funny.
go get some brisket queso.
When we're traveling around together, it's very funny. Emily and I will be out at an event, somewhere hanging out, and we'll get approached. They always approach me.
No one ever comes up to me in public, ever.
It's true.
Yeah, I know. I
don't feel like I'm that much more recognizable than you.
Well, yeah, and like I would think maybe they come up to you and they're like, "Oh my God, it's Matt Walsh." Well, they don't. They know
Matt
it.
Walsh has diabetes now.
They know it's Richard. No one ever recognizes me. Thank you, at Drundle.
Yeah. Well, we hope y'all have a very Merry Christmas. We love answering your questions. If you have more questions, please share those with us. We would love to read all of your comments, and we wish the best for you and your family, but we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and help us fight the anti-2A algorithm by sharing this video.
Merry Christmas. Wishes and prayers from the art attorneys for a very prosperous new year.